I'm just welcoming people. One of the strategies for these online sessions and webinars and Zoom rooms is ways to warm the room, and social emotional learning is so important. So the ways that we welcome students and parents and adults and community members into these virtual spaces is really important. And the way sometimes teachers will post something that students can interact with while they're joining. Sometimes we play some uplifting music, different kinds of things to welcome people to a virtual room like this. And when we can't, if you think about an event like this, if we were in person, there would be a foyer, we would be in an area where we would maybe be getting a cup of coffee and gathering and chatting with one another. And this is a virtual lobby right now that people are joining in right now. And I keep hearing the bell dinging that people are joining. I'm going to give a special shout out to my mom because I just saw my mother joined. So welcome to my mom, Fern. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining. This is a whole family and community affair, being ready to welcome our students back in a virtual way to start the school year. So I'll go ahead and get started. I think a few people are joining. We have almost 90 people in the room right now. If those continue to join, unless Lachey, would you like me to wait?
No, please go ahead and start your breakout session.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, first let me say thank you to Dr. Weber and her staff. I know Dr. Weber began her session earlier today by outlining what needs to happen for connectivity. We got to hear from our state superintendent and our county superintendent, and I really appreciate Dr. Weber and her staff, and especially Lachey. Thank you. We get the honor of having you in our breakout room to have this conversation with your constituents, and the ability to serve and to have a dialogue is really important because there's lots of great questions that people are having. And let's get started on this. So we're going to have a question and answer at the end. And so I just want to say what you're seeing on the screen right now is our back to school guide, what to expect when returning from school. And I'm going to go through some parts of that this morning, and know that there'll be more information that comes from your principals, and it's individual by school, but the big picture is what I'll go over today. So let's go to, I have my assistant Jen Maldonado is on with me. She's going to switch to the next slide now. Slide 2. Thank you, Jen. So first of all, as we just spent the first hour of today's session talking about technology and the importance of connectivity, I'd like to say that San Diego Unified specifically, there's 42 school districts in San Diego. I'm not sure if you all know that there's 42 different districts, and at different levels of readiness or preparedness or the ability to have technology available to students. San Diego Unified has over 10 years worth of investment in individual one-to-one computing and devices so that we have gone digital long before COVID-19. And often you hear me say that this pandemic has changed so much of our lives. So many things are different, but some of our core values, those become our North Star, that we don't change who we are, we change how we operate. And one of the things that has defined San Diego Unified, and thanks to the taxpayer over the last over a decade with 3 successful bond measures and investing in the infrastructure, when it comes to technology, we have a computer. We distributed in the spring 53,000 Chromebook computers to each student, and for the fall, all of the incoming pre-K kindergarten students, to make sure that there is connectivity. And we know that the device plus the connectivity with Cox Connect to Compete and AT&T, you just got to hear from them at the first hour of this webinar, how to connect. We have individualized supports if a family isn't connecting or they haven't figured out how to do it. We're there to support them with our great partners in the city. But when it comes to the hardware and the devices, we have those and will continue to provide those. And in addition to that, I think it was a question in the chat room actually about, well, what about families that are having trouble with their connectivity? What do we do? Well, we've set up a family online learning technical support line, and so the phone number is listed on here, and including the hours that were available. And we knew that San Diego Unified has a tech support line that's usually for the teachers to use when they're teaching in person, and now we need that support line to be expanded so that our families are able to have access in case they're in the middle of something and something is broken down or something isn't working. We want that tech support line to be available for them. So that's that phone number there for technology supports. And anybody who doesn't have their computer, isn't connected, we encourage you can connect with this phone number, but we also encourage you to connect with your school and your principal, because we have a whole team that's committed to ensuring that we have the technology available to students, all students, so they can be online. We say if you can't reach them, you can't teach them, and that's quite literally the case when it comes to online learning. And we've started to call it online learning instead of distance learning, because distance sends a message that we're far away, which we are physically, but our hearts are connected, our minds are connected. And while our physical doors are closed, learning is open, minds are open, and it's important that we have connectivity both literally and figuratively to connect to each and every student and their family in a way that's meaningful for them. So let's move on to slide 3. We're talking about what's going to happen, how's it going to be different in the fall compared to the spring. We know that the experience that we had in the spring was something that we had to go very quickly and pivot to an online learning environment in a matter of days. Like we say that we had to change on a dime, and I say it was less than a dime because it wasn't even really funding to do it. And so we pivoted. We, in the spring, put 13,000 hours of professional development available to our teachers so that they could quickly change their craft to an online environment. We distributed the Chromebooks, got the hotspots and the connectivity. But then what we did is during the spring, we took that time to learn and hear about the differences, that the things that families were saying they needed, what needed to change, how could things be better. And so we got a lot of feedback from students, from families, from teachers about how to improve upon the experience of distance learning that we had in the spring. And so what we see here is things are going to be better, and we're starting with the first week, starting August 31st for San Diego Unified and different districts. I'm assuming everyone that's in this chat room is San Diego Unified, but different districts in the county have different start times. For us, our first week is August 31st, and I think of that week as all of the feedback that we got from our families and our students around the challenges is having a kind of, if you think about it like college freshman orientation, it's an orientation to the online learning platform. And what does this look like? How do you have access to the tools and the resources and learning how to sign in? And we have varying degrees of families that were very comfortable in the online environment to families that needed a lot more support. So we're putting modules together that will be available that week around how to sign in, how to navigate the different platforms that we're using. One of the things that we heard a lot from parents is there were too many platforms, there were too many things to sign into in the spring, and we want to have that streamlined. And so during this welcome week, it's for students and families in that first week to navigate and get used to the online environment and all of the improvements that we've made from the spring. So that's going to be the beginning. And let's go to the next slide. So what you're seeing here is robust, engaging online learning. After that, August 31st, where we have, Jen, can you make that a little bit larger? I'm not sure if they can see it, or maybe they can. Maybe it's my old eyes that can't see it. But you can see here that when we have the online learning, what's important about things being better in the spring, this is how. We're going to have active learning strategies such as discussions, hands-on activities, projects, daily opportunities for community building. We want there to be connectivity, that you're building with your community, meeting your peers, meeting your teachers, and being able to connect in that way. Then we'll have more engaging and options for students. And you can see the circle here, or the wheel here, about all of the different things that we'll be doing with daily small group instruction and better ways of providing ongoing feedback. That's one thing that we heard from families is they're engaging with their teachers, but we want ongoing feedback. We want interaction. That's when the best teaching happens, is when there's the interaction, let's say the magic between the parent or between the student and the teacher when it happens in person, but when we can recreate that in an online setting, that's really important. You'll also see that we have new tools and strategies so students can collaborate with one another and make peer connections that our kids are missing one another. They're missing the peer-to-peer contact, and they can't be together in person, but there's really good research around there about how to connect in virtual environments and how to have really meaningful, authentic connections with one another. So I think all of these things are the social emotional learning and around movement and wellness. Those are things that we've incorporated into what our platforms are going to look like going forward in the fall, because it came from all of you. It came from what we heard we needed to see in terms of improvements. And now let's get to, let's see, slide 5, what this actually means for your student. Jen, was that slide 5? Let's see. There we go, instructional minutes, thank you. Can't tell what slide it is, but here you can see how we've broken down the instructional minutes, that there's 180 minutes let's see, Jen, can you make it bigger so we can see it? Just at the top part. Thank you. So this is our online learning is going to include 360 minutes of synchronous and asynchronous learning for students that will use a combination of the following activities. And some of the feedback was there wasn't enough learning time on screen. Some people are saying there's too much learning time on screen. We can't have kids on screen too much, and there's everything in between. And so we really want this to be personalized and customized. So what you'll see is that there's 180 minutes of teaching, which is going to include live, online, whole group, and small group instruction, and that's going to be daily. We heard feedback that in the spring, sometimes it wasn't daily, sometimes a student went a couple of weeks, or maybe not a couple of weeks, a couple of days, or a whole week and didn't see their teacher. We want that to be different, that each day there'll be whole group and small group instruction daily. There'll be 60 minutes of teaching that's dedicated to, I think Jen's fixing something, sorry about that, dedicated to additional small group instruction, just like we know in a brick and mortar classroom. When a teacher teaches a full lesson to the whole class, then there's differentiated small group instruction, and we've built that into the day. So if it's a small group guided reading or extra reteaching in math, customized supports, just like we would do in the brick and mortar classroom. That's the way we normally teach, and we want to build in time for that to happen so that there's conferring with students and there's teacher initiated office hours. So the remainder of the students might be completing independent work during that time, but there's teachers connecting with students as needed based on the needs that we're seeing our students have. And then there's 120 minutes of asynchronous instruction where there's independent work or enrichment. So you can see, then there's the early learning slides, and then scroll down a little bit, Jen, so you can see that students will be engaged in a variety of learning opportunities within the 360 instructional minutes that include independent practice, working in small groups, and enrichment opportunities. I said that right before she flipped to the next slide. So there's the instructional minutes, total minutes for TK through 5. I think that's important that you see this is how the minutes will actually work. Instructional minutes, TK through 5, you can see the total minutes, the whole group, small group, live instruction, and then the small group conferring in office hours, and then the flex time and the asynchronous learning time broken down. And then slide 7 shows you a little bit more on the minutes. I think what's important that people know is that it's not all day on the screen. All day on the screen is not healthy for anybody. We all know that. I don't know how many of you are zoomed out with lots of zooming and connecting, and there can be a real thing they're calling a Zoom fatigue. We don't want too much of that, but we do want live teacher interaction so students are getting the instruction that they need so that they can continue to progress. So this is what the instructional minutes look like in grades 6 through 12. And let's go on to the next one, slide 8. This is talking about students are going to be supported through their learning with standards-based grading, assessment, and feedback. We start the year with making sure that we're teaching for mastery, and standards-based grading and teaching for mastery is really important. It's an approach that using standards-based grading means we're teaching for mastery. It's not about anymore you teach something and whether or not the student learned it is sort of separate. This is about when we teach, if they haven't learned, then we want to go back and reteach and find different modalities and what's necessary for the student to be able to improve and to master the content that we've taught. Because if they can't master the content, then it's the old thing about when we teach it, you can teach something, but did they learn it? And learning is what our focus is. That's why we call it online learning. And through a standards-based grading and assessment, there's going to be grades, but kids are going to have a chance to improve and move towards mastery, which is important and new as we move forward into learning in this online environment. In slide 9. And the reason why all of this has been built the way it's been built, and our focus as we developed our online learning for the fall, is to maintain, like I said at the beginning, this changes how we operate, but it doesn't change who we are, and it doesn't change our belief systems. We continue to maintain our focus on equity, on the whole child, and on quality schools in every neighborhood. And I think it's important that we focus on the whole child. When we talk about an online environment, we're expecting students have access to the social emotional supports they need. There's PE lessons and VAPA, which is visual and performing arts that those are not getting lost inside the implementation of an online environment, that teaching the whole child means that we have interactive and supportive ideas around not just reading, writing, math, and the basics that kids need to learn, but a whole child approach. Make sure science is included, and the arts, and physical education. And quite frankly, our VAPA department, if you haven't seen the resources that were even put forward in the spring for VAPA, fabulous resources that were available, as well as physical education. And you might say, how do we do PE when we're online? That's actually one of the easier things in some ways when you look at the PE standards and the art standards, to customize those and give some really creative things for families to do. So many of the fitness things in the country right now are turning to a virtual way of doing that. So we want to keep our students healthy and fit, and we want to keep their minds expansive so that they have access to the whole child type strategies. And that's, you could limit this and reduce what we're doing down to let's just make sure we get the basics, and we don't want to do that. That would change who we are. So I'm really proud of our approach and the fact that we're maintaining our focus around equity, the whole child, and that quality school in every neighborhood. The supports are customized. I can see a couple of principals on here. Hi, Denise. Nice to see you. I don't know if people can see. You're the only one I can see. There might be more, but my screen is too small to see how many people are here. If there's another principal, sorry, I didn't say hi to you. I just happened to see her screen. But I know our principals are staying true to their mission and their core in serving the families, and the connection to your neighborhood school is so critical right now, that you connect with your principal, you connect with your teachers, and that any challenge that you may be experiencing, if what we've developed in our minutes, in our structure of our day, in the way that we're going to approach this work, whether you have a student with disabilities, a student who's learning English, we're customizing so that it'll work for your child. And if it's not, with our best intentions to make it work, please connect with your principal, with your service providers, with your case providers. For students with disabilities, we have online live supports, the related services, and individual services, so you can connect with the general ed teacher plus the service provider, so you can have live support for students with disabilities as well. Let's go to the next slide, Jen. So that's our online plan, but I want to be clear that we all want to get to on-site learning as soon as it's safe to do so. So our goal was to build the very best online learning approach with live virtual instruction, time for students to work on solidify their thinking, customize the learning, maintaining connections with teachers and peers. All of that came from what we heard from hundreds of hours of feedback from parents. Let us build a more robust online learning system with not as many platforms to navigate, social emotional supports, better supports for students with disabilities, better supports for English learners, all of that to build the best that we could for online learning, because it's just not safe to go back to in-person learning, which we had all hoped it would be by now. So let's build this the best that we know how. And at the same time, let's get ready for on-site learning, because as soon as it's safe for us to return to on-site learning for what we know the advantages of that, of the magic moment of being at school and being with your peers and your teacher, as we work towards that, all of the safety measures that need to be in place for that would happen. When it's safe to do so, it would be based on the health and safety guidelines. So we're planning for a tiered launch of on-site learning and looking at what it's going to be like to support students when they're ready to come back, and those that are most in need, how does it look to give them the support that they need, so that there could be a slow, that we hear our governor talk about, a dimmer switch, a slow return to keep it safe. What we don't want is to go backwards in the health metrics in our city. That when we closed on March 13th, we did it because we knew that the health conditions required us to do that. And the last thing we want to do is open too quickly or open in a way that's not safe and then see a surge like we have seen in other states, in the Midwest and back east and in the South, where schools have opened and they've opened for a whole group, everybody back for in-person learning, and then what happened is they went right back into a lockdown. So we're sending people home. So we want to do this in a slow and measured way and build the most robust online learning that we can in the meantime. And Jen, go to the next slide. So I want you to feel like you should stay in touch with us. Let us know how you're doing. We want to be connected with you. The way that that you connect with us, whether it's through Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or our website. There's so many tools that we're using, and I've heard great inspirational stories of principals that have found new ways to connect. One principal's using Instagram and has almost all of their kids like on the Instagram getting instant information. So it's really important that we stay connected literally and figuratively. And through the technology, we're able to do that so that when we can be together, there's going to be, it just makes me cry thinking about the reunions that we're going to see on campuses when we get to actually physically see our students again. I heard Dr. Weber say at the beginning that she hasn't seen most of her staff since March. I'm sure, Lachey, you can attest to that. And Dr. Weber said she's a hugger and she shakes hands and gives people hugs, and she's not able to do that at this point. And so I think that we miss all of that, and we miss that kind of connection that's so important. So with that, please stay connected with your teachers and your principals, because all of that really matters. And I'm just going to switch my screen so that I can see. There we go. And I think that was the end there. Thank you all for joining today. And I believe that we're going to go to Q&A. Is that correct, Lachey? I can start with a question that went straight to Dr. Weber in the big room. Someone specifically asked about Kearney, and that's in San Diego Unified. And so she said, oh, that's going to get in the breakout room. Superintendent Martin can handle that question. So Kearney High School is one of our high schools, and someone asked about the Kearney registration. So you're going to be hearing from your principal. If you haven't already, you should be hearing from your principal this week about what the registration looks like and how to move forward with that. The same is true also for computer pickup. If you haven't picked up a computer yet, we think that most of our students had a computer from the from the spring. They had their computer, they had their connectivity, but some didn't. Some families thought they'd be okay without a computer, and now that this is going to go on a little bit longer, they're saying, okay, I throw in the towel, I need a computer, or maybe something happened to the computer, they need to change it out. You will be getting more information about the computer pickup. You'll get that information from your principal as well. I think that came out as one of the questions. So if you need a computer, I think it's important that everyone knows that every school is going to have a different pickup date. So you need to connect with your school to know what the pickup date is going to be. And I think the Q&A is available now. So thank you, Lachey, and thank you, Jen, for turning that on. And the first question was, will this information be posted? And yes, the answer is yes, we'll post all this information. On the last slide, it had our district website, which is sandy.net, SANDI.net, and Dr. Weber's office will also be posting all of the information from today's presentation from both our district and the other districts, I'm sure, that are participating. I'm having a hard time seeing the chat myself, so I think somebody's going to have to get the questions to me.
Okay, so there was another question, and it was sent privately. Can you hear me, Cindy?
Yes, who is that?
Lachey.
Oh, hi, Lachey. I didn't recognize your voice.
So it said, what are expectations for working parents and level of involvement needed for K-2 kids who cannot self-direct?
Yeah, so what we see is kind of like the first day at kindergarten anyway. What's super important is flexibility. When we start the kindergarten school year, I remember when I was a principal, actually I was a kindergarten teacher, and I know the first week of kindergarten, even when you're in person, is challenging, getting kids used to routines, getting them used to standing in line, going to lunch, having circle time, all the things that you do in person. The teachers have to set those structures in place. So the first week, it's really important that you work with your teacher. Parents might have to be more involved at the beginning with our youngest learners about how to turn the computer on, how to mute yourself, how to unmute yourself. But I can tell you, I've watched kindergartners, even in the spring, get really proficient. Like, they are better at these technology tools than some of us are, some of our parents are. The kids get really fast at that. So it will go gradual into more and more independent, where the parent does not have to be there. I remember when we would start kindergarten at Central Elementary, where I spent 10 years, it would be the first day of school and there would be somebody in the hallway. All the parents are like looking through the room, seeing how the kids are doing. And the kids would cry, and we would, escort the parents out saying, don't worry, they're going to be fine. It's kind of the same way with online learning. Your teacher is going to work with you. Your teacher is going to make sure your student is having what they need. And if it's more, they need more support to get to independent or less support. Kindergarten matters. It's a time of year, it's a time for learning that really matters. And we know from the spring that we had a lot of kindergartners who didn't always log on. We had a great connectivity rate in the spring, but the kids that didn't log on the most were our kindergartners. So I'll put a plea out to the 108 people, except my mom, because I know my mom doesn't have a kindergartner starting school. But everyone else, if you have a kindergartner, or if you know somebody who has a kindergartner that's starting school, we need your help. We want people to get the message that kindergarten matters, and we're here for you, and we want you to get your computer and log on, and the teachers will help you with that. And they'll need more help in the beginning and less help as they get used to that and go a little bit more towards independence, which is what really matters. I think that there's a question about, let's see, hands-on science. What I want to say about that is our classes are important. While we can't be back in person yet, we're going to be providing lessons for students to do at home. Safe lessons, those don't try this at home type science lesson. We'll be careful about the kinds that we provide to you, but there's lots of hands-on approaches, and good pedagogy, good teaching practice has always been about project-based learning. We know our kids learn best with, we call it hands-on, minds-on learning, and so teachers will be providing that type of science interaction and flexibility so that there'll be things related to that kids can interact in a project-based learning kind of way. So I think that was a question from Sooner. But back to the kindergartners, please help us get our kindergartners enrolled soon. I'm really worried when I look at kindergarten enrollment. It's a little early, but now is the time. If you know a kindergartner anywhere in the city that hasn't enrolled, please have them enroll. We have a way to enroll virtually. You do not have to come in person to enroll your child in kindergarten. If you do need to come in person, we do have in-person enrollment as well, but that's starting next week. So there's a lot of questions around when parents are going to be getting specific information about their school. Some principals sent some things out today or Friday, and most of them are sent. Our principals returned this week. We gave them all the information for all of our approaches for online, and principals I know are putting their communications together. And so you should start seeing specific information from your principal, from your school, starting to come out next week. Just remember the principals got back from break just this week, and they are anxious to communicate. I see someone is saying that they were told that we are out of devices. That's why I'm so thankful to Lachey and Dr. Weber for putting this town hall together, because that is not true. We have plenty of devices. We are not out of devices, and your school will let you know when you can come pick them up. If you heard we're out of devices, that may have been in another district. Remember, there are 42 districts in the county. Maybe the news covers different districts, and sometimes it's hard to tell which district is being talked about but if you're a student enrolled in San Diego Unified School District, and if you're a kindergartner and you're not enrolled, then get enrolled, because we have plenty of devices for all of our students in San Diego Unified, over 105,000 students. Anyone that needs a device will make sure that they have it, and your school is going to let you know very soon when you can come pick it up if you don't have that already.
Okay, there was another question that I added to your direct chat. It says, is there a plan to get the special needs kids back in person, since Linda Hammond said yesterday that guidelines will be put forth on how to do so?
Yes. The chair of our state board, Dr. Linda Darling Hammond, spoke at the governor's press conference yesterday. I was able to have a conversation with her earlier this week around our deep desire to find a way to have in-person services for our students with disabilities. So I just want everyone to know the entire state is working on that. We all want that to happen. What the details of that, the guidelines have to come out, because right now you can't, but how can you, and how does that work? Knowing that Dr. Linda Darling Hammond and Tony Thurmond at the California Department of Education, and then of course locally here, Dr. Gothold, we are all advocating for that. And I think give it a couple of weeks and we should know more about that, but that is definitely a direction that we would like to head in.
Okay, there's another question about what are the guidelines for grading? Families and students need to know the details, the rubrics from the very beginning, so that way they know their overall end goal.
Yeah, so the way I talked about grading in my presentation was this notion that through we want it to be mastery based, and instead of just, okay, we taught, you didn't learn it, and you got a poor grade, and then it's game over. Rather than that approach, an approach for standards-based grading is we have the standards, we know what we want students to accomplish and know and be able to do. We teach for that mastery, and then when a student isn't mastering the standard, we don't walk away and say, oh, well, they didn't learn it. We actually stay with them and come up with what teachers do best in their craft is reteach, come up with a new modality. Some students learn better hands-on, some are visual learners, some are auditory learners, some need specialized small group instruction and follow-up, but we're teaching for mastery with a standards-based grading approach. And we're part of what we're doing is supporting our teachers to be able to teach in that way and make sure that standards-based grading is a way that we think is most helpful for our students, especially during this time. I just want to repeat what everyone said on the first part of this call. We posted the Common Core standards online, and schools are going to be sharing those standards. So parents can judge for themselves whether they're getting the knowledge that they need. You can see what the scope and sequence is, you can see what the standards are, and that we are moving forward to give students access to the curriculum and the learning that they need.
Okay. Will the school lunch program change now that school is starting?
No, there's going to be a little small break in the lunch. We've been serving, we've reached 3 million meals. Quickly after we closed our schools, we started our food distribution centers, and those have been going all summer long. And we will continue that. There's going to be, I think the date is Monday, the 24th. I'm not quite sure. The date is on the website, but there's going to be a day where we're going to have a break while we switch to being able to expand the food services for when school starts the week of the 31st. And there's going to be an announcement on the food this week, but we want to continue to provide the food services that we know so many of our families are dependent on. There will be a 2-hour window from 12 to 2 every day at 82 different food distribution sites across the city that you'll be able to go to get your lunch, but we'll be announcing what those locations are and what the times will be. And even though there's a small break between when we're going to shift from the summer food services to the regular food services for the school year beginning, those 2 days that we're going to use to transition, we're going to be providing additional food so that it'll last you for the week. So we'll put some shelf-stable food so that what you take home that week will last you through the week when we have the 3 days that we're going to be closed for food services to transition to the food services that we need before when we're ready to come back on the 31st. So, and we're also going to continue with fresh fruits and vegetables with some of our partners, make sure that we have healthy foods, not just, all of our food plus additional foods that we've got a lot of feedback on that was helpful for our families, and that will continue as well. And we'll get that announcement on the food coming up this week. And we'll give it to you, Lachey. You can put it on Dr. Weber's website. We'll be on our website at sandy.net. You'll hear about it from your school. We know that during times like this, we need to over-communicate and give people lots of access to the supports that we've designed for our families.
Okay, we're going to ask a couple of more questions as we're getting low on our time. This one is for you, Superintendent Martin. Are you aware of the negative impacts that both the 3-class per semester system and the alternative 9-week rotation system can have on AP students and on student-led electives such as JROTC or band? Why is a rolling block or an AP or an AB schedule not possible if it still complies with the limits placed by the teachers union? So once again, why is a rolling block or an AB schedule not possible if it still complies with the limits placed by the teachers union?
I think that this is really important to get this question asked to our high school leaders so that we're designing the instruction. Dr. Weber talked about, can kids have access to additional AP classes like Latin, if it's not offered at their school, can we get additional classes there? But the specifics around that, around the schedule and the AB block, I want to direct you to your high school principal to have that conversation because it's very technical. Yes, I do understand what this person's, what the question is, but I think it requires a very individual technical response. So if we can follow up, Lachey, if that person's able to have us connect after this call so we can get into the technicals about how we're implementing the block schedule and the ability for students to get the courses that they need, the AP courses that they need, and the time that they need for their for instruction to be robust. So let's follow up with the technical stuff on that particular question. I think that's important. I see that somebody asked us what, once schools reopen, will there be an option for families who just want to continue with online learning? And yes, we are going to have that option. We've been planning for that. We know that there are some families that this online environment is working for them. And there are families where students have a health condition that makes it difficult for them to come to in-person learning. Even when we say it's safe to do so, they want to stay in this online environment longer. So when we do come back to in-person learning, those that want to or need to stay in online learning environment, we will make that available for families as well. I also see that someone asked if you need to pick up a school device, what do you do? If you have a computer and you don't need a district device to access online learning, some people have their own connectivity at home. We'll help you have that if you don't, and of course we'll get you the device if you do not have that yet. I also see, let's see, was there another question? I think I got that one. Okay.
We have one that says, how can San Diego Unified engage CBOs to assist in this new normal? Many include retired experienced educators.
These are super important. The CBOs are very important in terms of how to be creative in supports that our students need. And I know like the Elementary Institute of Science and many, I should just call out one, many of our CBOs are great partners for us in wanting to be creative in some of the asynchronous learning time. Some science or hands-on activities through our CBOs I think is going to be critically important. And again, I'll refer you to your school and your principal and your local community where those CBOs are and where that's the most important to make that connection. Okay. I can't quite see all the questions in the chat because somehow that's not coming up for me. So
it says, will students be able to receive physical textbooks, or will textbooks be all virtual?
No, there will be physical textbooks and you'll be able to come to the school. Again, the principal will give communication if a textbook is needed for a classroom, for a class that they're taking. We'll have, obviously we have to follow the safety guidelines to not have large gatherings to come and pick, everybody come to school on a certain day. We'll have a schedule much like we did with the computer distribution. You'll be able to come to your school and pick up textbooks that you need if they're necessary for a class. I think what's really important is a lot of the questions, it's that you connect with your principal. I see Denise shaking her head, like principals know and have the support, can connect and problem solve for individual families. That's really important. What we did was we set a standard. We set a standard for 6 hours of instruction that's available every day. But your school is going to work with you to make that work for you and for your family. And that we set that standard of this is what instruction is going to look like in an online environment. But what's key is flexibility. Flexibility with the teacher, working with the family, working with the student on digital tools and other tools that they need to make their learning successful. And I think it's really important to talk to your principal, talk to your teachers. I know the teachers you haven't connected with yet, but that will be soon. And I always say that that's the first place to start because teachers form the relationship with their students and give them what they need to be successful, whether they're in person or whether they're online. And teachers want nothing more than their kids to be successful. This is heartbreaking for educators. This is what we're seeing happen to public education across our country. To not have the ability to be with our students in person is so hard for us. And so we're even more dedicated and committed to making what we are doing as successful and personalized and individualized as possible, because school is what we've defined our entire lives around. We believe in school. We believe in the viability of school. We believe in school being the great equalizer. And we want our students to have the very best possible learning that they can given this environment. And the things that we can't control, we push aside and we move forward with our North Star of what we know we can do. And that's critically important.
I'm going to give you 2 more questions, probably 3, but one of them is in regards to IEP. So
Yes.
is there a plan for students with that as it pertains to distant learning and also doing their IEP assessments? Is there
Yes.
a plan put in place?
Yes, IEPs are very important. They've always been important. That's an individual education plan for students with disabilities, and those IEPs have to continue. And one of the things that Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond was indicating in the press conference yesterday, the reason why the whole state's working on this ability to figure out how to have some type of in-person contact with students and make it safe and have it that ability to go forward, is specifically that IEP testing. Some of the testing that we need to do to qualify students or to do a triennial IEP is really impossible or very difficult to do in an online environment. And so we are doing online IEPs. We have met, we hold the IEPs. We're not waiting till we can be in person to have an IEP meeting. We have video conferences so that they're live and they're interactive, and the families and the case providers can all participate in it. And when we get to assessments, if the state is able to get some guidelines for that, we're looking towards the ability for in-person when it comes to things like that. But in the meantime, we're not delaying the IEPs. The IEPs need to happen, and those have been happening in the spring and will continue to happen in the fall, that they will be online, live through video conferencing. And we're going to be adding to every IEP, we'll be adding a distance learning component, because we know that the differentiation that's needed for a student, if a student has an auditory processing deficit or visual processing deficit, the kinds of modifications that are written into an IEP during brick and mortar learning are very different than in an online environment. So we'll be adding into each IEP this component for distance learning, and like speech pathology, but really takes individual focus. There's not a specific answer for each student. Some parts of special education really do work well online. Speech services work a lot better online than occupational therapy or adaptive PE. Some are better in person, but that's why we want to customize it and have the IEPs be revised to include the distance learning component so that students with disabilities are as successful as possible.
Okay, this one goes back to one of the questions pertaining to the AB rolling back schedule, the rolling block schedule. It says, so this is coming from Patrick Henry High School. Our principal let us know that she had no power to implement an AB rolling block schedule because it is against San Diego Unified SDEA agreement guidelines. Is there a specific reason as to why we are limited to only these 2 options?
I want to follow up with that parent and that principal to make sure I understand what's underneath that question before I give an answer that might be too detailed or not detailed enough. I appreciate the question, though, and we'll follow up with that. Thanks for letting me know it was Patrick Henry High School. I'm not sure what the principals, we'll get to the underneath what those details are.
Okay.
I think in the chat room, I see someone in the chat room, which I'm having a hard time following, but I'm trying to catch them as quickly as I can. But somebody in the chat room is saying about getting a device, and the school told them that there was no device available, and they're asking about BVHS, and I don't believe that's one of our schools. I'm not sure what BVHS stands for, which high school that is, but Bonita Vista High School, and that is not in San Diego Unified. So I'm not sure the details of that, but I would recommend contacting the principal at that school, which sounds like you already did, and maybe the superintendent, and find out what the timeline is for being able to get that device.
Okay. There's a question about, will there be set hours for school, or will it be the same for everyone? Or will teachers have their own assorted hours online?
Well, we know that's really important for families to be able to plan a day, and for a school, if you have a first grader, a third grader, and an 8th grader, and if everybody's with their teacher at the same time, we know that's really important. So our principals are problem solving that at the school level and school by school, and we set the standard, like I said, for a 6-hour day. And in that 6-hour day, the 6 hours of instruction is what's standard, but it's customized, and it will be different by school and by teacher. So again, your principal will be talking about what the schedule is going to look like, what the day is going to look like, and teachers, when their login times are going to be, and taking advantage of the live synchronous instruction and then the asynchronous instruction and building out a day within that 6 hours that works best for your family, and especially if your family has multiple students and multiple classes at the same time, so that we can balance that out. If you end up with a conflict where I'm imagining a family has 5 kids and they all have the same class at the same time, then that could be difficult. That would be something you go back to the teachers and work out something that's going to work for your family. Like I said, it's got to be customized, just like it is in person, but we're going to be partnering with you on how to customize what's going to work for your family. I think what's really important is these custom learning experiences are based on what we see the students' needs are. And it's going to include daily live instruction, online instruction up to 3 hours a day. We'll have independent learning that's going to be at least 2 hours. And then we're going to be working with other students in small groups or participating in those educator office hours at least 1 hour. That's how it all fits together as a big structure. And then we individualize for families and students, working with the principal and the teachers at each school site.
Okay. That will conclude the question.
Lachey, I just want to know if my mom asked anything. Fern didn't ask anything?
No, I don't think. No, I don't see anything. But that will conclude our Q&A session as we have reached our time. All the other questions that are here, I see that there is one from Dr. John Brown that I can email directly to you in regards to having some HR questions.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Brown.
Also, this one sent over to you. Other than that, I will let you go ahead and close out. And if you can go back to your chat to see the questions from Dr. Brown, I appreciate that.
I think, Jen, are you able to monitor that? My assistant, can she see that? And thank you so much. I appreciate everybody. And it's become a cliche, and I don't mean it to sound like a cliche when I say we're all in this together, but we truly are one big San Diego family and community meeting this together. So I appreciate all of you, and thank you, Dr. Brown. I see your message now, and we'll follow up with your question, and my assistant will make sure we've copied the chat if anything that we missed. So thank you, everybody. Please stay safe. Remember, we wear our masks, we practice social distancing and hand washing. You might be tired of hearing it, but the more we do that as a big San Diego community, the sooner we can get back to school, because we get this pandemic under control for our community and get back to what we know is best, which is in-person learning. Thank you, everybody.